Good morning, class. Yesterday we started our second term with medieval India and we took up the Cholas. Yesterday we learned about the different sources from which we come to know about the political history and administration of the Chola kings, mainly Rajaraja I and Rajendra Chola. Now the different sources from which we get to know about the political history and administration are the inscriptions, which include the copper plate inscriptions and the ones on the pillars and walls of temples. Another one is the Brihadeshwar temple. Now all the grants that were given by the Cholas and all the transactions, all the grants that were made by the Cholas, they have been inscribed on these copper plate grants and stone inscriptions. Now, yesterday we learned about Rajaraja I, what a brilliant general he was, about his many campaigns, how he attacked the kingdoms of Pandyas and Cheras as well as parts of Mysore. He conquered not just the entire but the northern half of Sri Lanka. He managed to annex territories on the coast of Kerala, Ceylon and the Maldives Islands and became rich through the money that came to them from overseas trading. Now, today we will learn about Rajendra Chola, his son. I want you to open up to page number 69. Rajendra succeeded his father Rajaraja I. He continued his father's policies. So whatever administration was there under the rule of Rajaraja I, Rajendra Chola followed the same without making any changes to them. He invaded and annexed the whole island of Sri Lanka. Remember, his father only managed to conquer the northern half of Sri Lanka, but Rajendra Chola not just invaded but also annexed the entire island of Sri Lanka, and they were not able to free themselves from Chola control for another 50 years. Now Rajendra's campaigns were daring because he himself led his men and he improvised on the go. Once his armies marched up to the east coast of India through Odisha and up to the Ganga river. Rajendra Chola himself led the army up to the Godavari and thereafter his generals took charge of the army. So the morale of his army was always high as the king himself used to lead his men, and the king happened to be a very brave general. The Chola army defeated Mahipal, the king of Bengal. To commemorate or to honor this victory, he adopted the title of Gangaikonda and built a new capital called Gangaikonda Cholapura. His most daring campaign was in Southeast Asia. For centuries, Indian merchants had been trading with various parts of Southeast Asia and southern China through the Straits of Malacca, which was held by the kingdom of Sri Vijay, which we are talking about modern day Indonesia. Now, because we are talking about flourishing economy, flourishing trade, so the traders or the merchants, they wanted to have a control over the entire trade and economy of the area. So thereby these merchants of Sri Vijay were creating problem for the Indian merchants. Now Indian merchants, they turned to Rajendra Chola for help. What did he do? He sent out a huge navy and defeated the Sri Vijay king. As a result, Indian trade with Southeast Asia and southern China continued, thereby greatly enriching the Chola kingdom. He built magnificent palaces and beautiful temples at his new capital, Gangaikonda Cholapura. So, now coming to the Chola administration, which was divided into the central government, the provincial government and local self-government. Now, we learned early on that Rajendra Chola did not make any changes to the policies which were taken up during his father's time, Rajaraja I. Now let us see how the government or the local or the administration worked. The Chola system of administration was highly organized and efficient. The king was the pivot of administration and all the authority rested in his hand, that he was the main central government. The king was the most important person in the Chola administration, as all authority was vested in him. But see, he had council of ministers to advise him. So there were people around who were good in their own fields, efficient and capable people who were there to advise the king, but the final authority rested in the king's hand. Whatever he decided became the rule. Now the king often went on tours in order to keep a check on the administration. Most probably he disguised himself and kept a check on how things were going on in his kingdom. The officers were paid by giving them assignments in revenue-bearing lands. All officers of the administration, they were paid not in cash but in kind. How? They were given revenue-bearing lands. Revenue-bearing lands are land which are not used, they are agricultural land and they are not used for any other purposes other than to bear crops or have some kind of industry. Now the princes were associated with the ruling sovereigns and actively employed in peace and war. Now who were these princes? The extended family of the ruling king. You know, in the medieval India, ancient India, the kings, they had numerous wives, and the sons from these numerous wives, they were given some or the other, some kind of grant or land, and made self-sufficient. Now this kept in check that they did not even rebel and try to conquer the throne which in truth belonged, which was heredity and which went to the eldest son. Now the central government looked after external defense, internal peace and order, promotion of general prosperity, that is making sure that trade and economy they went on smoothly, and cultural progress of the empire, giving grants to artists, craftsmen, then authors, poets, constructing buildings, temples, palaces. Now coming to provincial government. The Chola Empire was divided into mandalams or provinces. These were further divided into Valanadu and Nadu. Princes of the royal family were appointed governors of provinces. Now local self-government. Cholas were good administrators. They believed in local self-government, that they knew that a particular area will have particular problems. So it was better left to the local people to sort them out according to the environment or the conditions prevailing over there. In many of the villages, the administration was carried out not by the government officials but by the villagers themselves. So the people residing there, they took matters in their hand. They had elders or people who were known for their wisdom, and these people, they sorted out the problems which were taken up. These problems were localized and did not affect the entire kingdom as such. Now these villages had three types of village assemblies, namely the Ur, the Sabha and the Nagaram. There are long inscriptions on the walls of some of the village temples giving details of how the Ur and the Sabha were organized. So this is important, children. Okay, the Ur was the common type of assembly of the village where the land was held by all classes of people who were therefore members of the local assembly. Doesn't matter whether they were artisans or peasants or tradespeople or Brahmins or Kshatriyas. Now the Sabha was an exclusively Brahmin assembly of the village. So the Sabha consisted of only the Brahmins, where all the land belonged to the Brahmins. Now the Nagaram was an assembly of merchants and belonged to localities where traders and merchants were in a dominant position. They dominated the community. Villagers who owned land were chosen by a vote to the council. The life and work of the villages were discussed in these council. This was a source of popular strength because it united the people. So when people came together to overcome some kind of difficulty or problem, so they were united in their efforts. Now all affairs concerning the village, such as collection of taxes, settlement of disputes and allocation of water, were looked after by the committee. So there were different committees for different affairs of the government. The temple in the Chola kingdom was the center of social activity. It was not only a place of worship but was also a place where people gathered together. So they just did not come there to worship, but basically it was a kind of meeting place where people shared their joys and sorrows. It was a social place. Now some temples owned huge lands and participated in inland and overseas trade. So the temples were not only restricted to worshipping, but they took part in trade also, both inland and overseas trade. The lands donated to the temples were known as Devdaya or Devdan. In some cases, instead of giving land to temples, land revenue of certain villages was assigned to the temple, and the concerned villagers were instructed to pay land revenue in produce and in gold to the temple treasury. Now, not all temples owned land. Some temples were given revenue from adjoining villages, and these villagers or the headmen of these villages, they made sure that the land revenue was in produce, like crops and all, and in gold to the temple treasury. Now the temples also played an important part in imparting education. The temples were also the biggest employers after the state, providing work and means of livelihood to a large number of people. Now all those landless people who did not have work worked in the lands which were owned by the temples. So thereby, now construction of temples was going on at the same time. Now in the temples there were schools running, so all people were required to undertake a lot number of jobs and thus earn a decent living from these temples. The temples used to take care of the welfare of its workers by providing food, clothing and housing facilities, and by arranging proper education and establishing hospitals. So it was not the job of the administration or the king to establish hospitals or to provide education, but it was the temples who were doing this. The temple was also a center for education. The priests of the temple were the local teachers, as there were no separate schools. The schools were housed in the temple courtyard. So the schools were there in the temple courtyard itself. Students learned their lessons in two languages, Sanskrit and Tamil. The religious teaching was in Sanskrit. Why? Because the texts were in, such as Veds, had to be studied. Especially the Brahmins, they had to learn it by heart. The students learned Tamil, the language which was widely spoken in the Chola kingdom. Tamil was influenced by Sanskrit and gradually incorporated a number of Sanskrit words. Now, for today, we will only do the central government, provincial government and the local self-government. Tomorrow, we will take up the revenue and the Chola art. As of now, I want you to give a thorough reading, not just to Rajendra Chola, but to Rajaraja I and the Chola administration. Anything which you have not understood, we'll take it up once the school reopens. Till that time, stay safe, stay blessed.